the PA regulations do need to be modernized. We are not in statutes. And a couple of years ago, there was a chair of the medical board that went rogue, and the changes that he was wanting to make would have basically taken PAs off the table and off the map and made it even harder for us to practice and to help serve Alaskan communities and patients. Right now, Alaska PAs need to have 2 collaborating physicians, and we're the only state that requires that. And this was rules that were set in 1970-ish, before PAs were really established. Training has changed. The world has changed. Collaboration has changed. Medicine has changed. We need to update our statutes.
Welcome to the East Anchorage Book Club. I'm your host, Andrew Gray. The purpose of this podcast is to tell the stories of Alaskans of interest and importance. Today's guest is Physician Associate Christi Froiland. After over a decade as an athletic trainer in the lower 48, she went to PA school and then returned to her hometown of Anchorage. She has practiced both in urgent care and in dermatology for the past 18 years. She has also served for the last decade as the PA representative to the Alaska State Medical Association. Outside of the legislature, I too am a PA, and I know Christi through our professional organization, the Alaska Academy of Physician Assistants. Our American professional organization has officially changed the name of our profession to Physician Associates. Alaska PAs have voted to officially change our name to Physician Associates as well, but the name change has not happened at the regulatory or statutory level yet. The PA profession in Alaska needs modernizing beyond a name change, though. And although we won't speak directly about it, we will reference Senate Bill 89, sponsored by Senator Lukey Tobin, which would modernize Alaska laws governing PAs. Christi Froiland, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up here in Anchorage. I moved here when I was 10. I don't really remember anything before that.
What schools did you go to?
I went to Ocean View Elementary and Hanchu and then Service. Back in the day when Service Hanchu was a combo school, they were building Hanchu Junior High. I spent 7th grade at Service Hanchu and then 8th grade at the new Hanchu Junior High on Lake Otis, and then back to Service for high school.
What did your parents do?
My mom was a stay-at-home mom until my sister was in elementary school, and then she worked for the school district, so she kept the same calendar as us. And my dad worked for GSA, General Services Administration, with the federal government.
Did you go away for college?
I went to UAA for a couple of years. I actually started at UAA when I was a senior in high school because I thought high school was dumb. So I did 3 classes at Service, and then in the afternoon I went to UAA. And then UAA for my freshman year, and then undergrad, the University of South Dakota, and ended up with a degree in athletic medicine, and then the University of Nebraska, where I got a master's in sports medicine.
To become an athletic trainer?
An athletic trainer.
What was your first job as an athletic trainer?
I had athletic trainer at a small university just outside of Omaha. It's now Midland University. I was there for 10 years.
You were there for 10 years. Mm-hmm. What does an athletic trainer do all day? We
manage the healthcare of the sports team. We do prehab, making sure the field is set, making sure that the athletes are ready. We do a lot of post-injury care, a lot of pre-injury prevention.
You did it for all sports?
At Nebraska, I was football, cheer, softball, and swim, diving. And at Midland, I was the head athletic trainer for 12 sports. And after a few years, we hired an assistant. Her name is Becky. The 2 of us took care of everybody and had a staff of students that were training in the major.
It's interesting that you managed cheer. I think some people might suspect that those folks wouldn't need a trainer, but I'm guessing that there's probably some terrible cheerleading injuries.
Oh, they were. Those athletes are tough.
What made you decide that you wanted to go further? Were you unsatisfied with being an athletic trainer? Or?
I knew it was a job for a younger person. When we started football season in the middle of August, my next day off was probably Thanksgiving Day. And it was 7 days a week, not 12 hours a day, but it was 7 days a week. We'd have Sunday treatments, we'd have Sunday practices. And I knew that I was going to burn out. And I wanted to leave that venue before I was a danger to the kids that I was in charge of.
Because you were afraid that at a certain point you weren't going to be able to do your best work on that type of schedule.
Exactly.
So you were looking at further education or like what you were going to do next. And how did you decide what to do next?
Because the orthopedic surgeons that we'd worked with, both at Nebraska and at Midland, had PAs in their staff. And our team family practice physician had PAs in his clinic. And I worked with PAs both in family med as our team physician and in ortho as our team orthopedic physicians. And I knew their competence level. I knew their ability to partner. And I knew that they were trusted colleagues. They were just part of our sports medicine team. And I knew at my age, at the time
you were early 30s.
I was early 30s. I could have gotten into medical school. I chose to go to PA school because of the timing, because it was 2.5 years at Nebraska Med. I knew I could do what I wanted to do in 2.5 years. I didn't want to go to medical school.
Your PA program was associated with a medical school, so you were actually going to PA school with medical students.
Correct. The PA program and the medical program were parallel programs. We shared an anatomy lab. We shared physiology lab.
So you dissected the human body together.
Yes. We shared the basement of that building and the bodies on the basement. Like the one body was an MD body. The next body was PA PT. And we just alternated so we weren't in everybody's elbow room all the time.
So mine was also a medical school and a PA school at the same time. And we generally worked on the body after the med students. The med students would have it in the morning, and then the PA students would have the same body in the afternoon, which is a bummer because it meant that things were already cut open and we didn't get to do quite as much of the initial dissection.
Nope. We had our own body. It's very humbling to say that these people gave literally their bodies for us to learn.
Yeah, I don't know what your experience was like, but there were 4 of us who worked on this one body, and she had a name. Like we talked about her.
Yep, we learned their name, and if we wanted to learn their family, the anatomy staff knew these people. And at the very end, we had a thank you celebration for all of their families could come if they chose.
So graduated from PA school, did you know what type of medicine that you wanted to practice?
Going into PA school as an athletic trainer, I assumed I was going into ortho. And because I had over 10 years of experience on the field in athletic medicine, the frustrations that I had with the ortho jobs that were available, I felt that my skills would be underutilized. And I didn't really want to be first assistant surgery. I liked being on the field, in the dugout, on the sidelines. And I ended up not taking jobs in ortho and working for primary care associates in the urgent care. And I figured I'd be there for a couple of years and find something else.
And you came back to Anchorage.
I came back to Anchorage. I thought that I would be at primary care. I thought I'd be here in Alaska for a few years to figure out the next step. And it's been 18.
You eventually ended up in dermatology. How did that happen?
The dermatologist that I worked for was Tom Center, and he was downtown in a old house. He moved into that building in 1984. He was my high school dermatologist. And over the years of going to college and going to grad school, he actually trained at Nebraska Med also. And he just stayed in my head. You should think about medicine. You should think about PA school. Hey, you and I both went to Nebraska Med. They've got a really good PA program. You should think about that. So he just stayed in my brain through the years that I knew him. And so when I got into PA school, I sent him a letter that was basically, thank you for advice over the years. I've been accepted into UNMC PA program. I appreciate your guidance. I've taken your advice. I've made the next step into medicine. And he sent me a postcard back, because this is back in 2003. He sent me a postcard back that I still have, and it said, you will do a derm rotation. It will be with me. Here's my direct number. And fast forward a couple of years, I did do a derm rotation. And after every patient, he was very tall and he wore glasses. And after every patient, we'd walk out of a room and he'd put his glasses on the end of his nose and he would say, derm changes lives. Next patient, derm's not just acne. Next patient, derm makes a difference. Medical derm makes a difference. And he got in my head. And a few years later, when I graduated, I contacted him and said, hey, I've graduated. I moved back to Anchorage. Do you need a derm PA? And he said, no, I don't. You need to find a job in family med because it's a good base. And I will call you when you're ready. So I found my job at primary care, still at Huffman. And a couple of years later, Dr. Center called me and said, let's have lunch and talk about your future in dermatology. We had lunch and I said, I like my job in the urgent care. And he said, you're a PA. You can do both. Let's figure it out. And so for 17 years, I've done 2 jobs and we've just figured out the schedule.
Talk a little bit about a typical day in a derm PA's life. You saw 20, 25 patients a day?
Correct.
And what were the types of patients that you would see in a typical day?
So still in medical derm, just a different office. It goes everywhere from a skin check because somebody turned 50 and they grew up in the sun to somebody who's very worried about a new lesion that popped up they can't see and they Googled it and Dr. Google told them that it was melanoma and they needed to come in and have it checked out, to high school acne, adult acne. My skin has gotten weird since I've been through menopause. A little bit of everything. And that's what I like about dermatology is it's way more diverse than they teach you in school.
I think there is like the stereotype that it's like acne and Botox is what you're doing, but that's not really true. And I also know that there's like a sort of a partnership between dermatology and rheumatology. Can you tell a couple stories about people coming in because they thought that they had just like a simple skin lesion, but it turned out to be this autoimmune disease, for example?
So I do co-manage a lot of patients with the rheum docs. Some of the most common ones are psoriatic arthritis and psoriasis. There's a condition called dermatomyositis. Lupus is a really common one.
They just think they have a rash on their face, and you're like, huh.
Nope, this is what it is, and this is how we get you started. And I co-manage a lot of patients. And because rheumatology is booked out for so long, and I have enough of a relationship with the rheumatology docs, I'm comfortable making the diagnosis, starting the lab, starting them on medication, and then getting them in for room for consult. And often I can get people started and treated months before they have a room consult, and then room just consults and agrees or changes, and we co-manage a lot of patients.
So I think a mistake that some folks make, and shockingly some very well-educated legislators make, is some of them assume that the patient is seeing you, the PA, and then later seeing the doctor for the exact same thing, which of course would be extraordinarily inefficient. So with the many years of experience that you have in derm, how often is it that you need to go talk to the doctor in the practice to get a second opinion or to ask a question about something?
So obviously, when I first started as a derm PA, I was very closely mentored by Dr. Center. I think he did a really good job in training me. We had months of just shadowing, and then months we discussed every patient. And then he would just pat me on the shoulder and say, okay, you got this. I'm here when you need. And I would check way more frequently than I probably needed to, until one day I was in the clinic by myself and everybody was in Hawaii, and I reviewed the day in my head and I was comfortable with the decisions that I had made because of the way that I was trained. Now, 17, 18 years later, I still do ask questions, but sometimes I don't ask questions of the doctor that I work directly with, because after 18 years, you have your own resources. Sometimes I need to ask questions of my oncology colleagues. Sometimes I need to ask questions of my rheumatology colleagues. And so just because I'm in a derm office doesn't mean that I directly ask my dermatologist. Sometimes I need to consult with a general surgeon because I'm dealing with a melanoma and it's too big for me to do in the office and it needs to be surgerized. And so I consult with general surgery. And so just because I'm a derm PA working with a dermatologist doesn't mean that I ask my dermatologist. I have my own practice. I see my own patients. He's around to consult should I need him. He asks me questions also. But medicine is a team sport. You just have to know what your team is and know who on your team you need to ask the questions of.
And I have my own subscription to Up to Date. And when I'm working urgent care, I check myself all day long. Or I'm not calling a person. I'll say,
I'm just going to triple check the dose.
Or I think this antibiotic will work. Let me make sure that's the gold standard. Is that the preferred antibiotic? And I check the reference. If a well-respected reference that everybody is using, MDs, DOs, PAs, NPs, says that this is the correct antibiotic, I don't need to ask a person.
Correct. And that comes with experience. And sometimes I will triple check a dose just to make sure that it is correct, because medications are not benign. Everything has a risk, benefit, and a possible side effect.
So you had this very close relationship with Dr. Center, had been his PA for 17 years, basically probably knew what he was going to say about something before he said it at that point. And then he retired. What happened?
Early last year, 2024, he decided that he was going to retire and he was going to be done June 30th. And it was hard. I've known this man since I was 14. So it was hard to know that part of my life was over. And part of the unknown was what's going to happen with this clinic. It ended up being sold to one of the dermatologists that I had worked alongside with for years.
Did you have thoughts of that you would take over the practice?
Dr. Center and I had talked about it, but to come down to the decision of, do I want to take over a practice? At this time of my life, at 55, I didn't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that in order to take over a practice, it would be more time and more effort and more energy than I was willing to spend to make a successful practice.
If you're comfortable talking about it, like you decided not to stay with the practice under the new ownership. Dr. Center had trusted you completely, and maybe the new ownership didn't.
The dermatologist that purchased the practice had worked as a dermatologist in that practice for around 10 years. And I was never really allowed to ask her questions because I was, quote, not her PA. And so since we all worked for Dr. Center, I was not her problem. I was not her PA to consult with.
So because you were, quote unquote, not her PA, she minimized interaction with you.
Yes.
And so she probably didn't know the quality of your work. But if she's been in the practice for 10 years, it seems like she would.
We each saw our own patient panel. Patients could call in and request me or request the other PA or request her. I did not feel comfortable.
So you decided to leave.
I decided to leave. And part of my departure was I just didn't trust her. I didn't have confidence in
your working relationship.
My working relationship at that office going forward.
So where'd you go?
I landed at Avante. Avante has a dermatology office, and they put it together for me and my dermatologist that came with me.
Okay, so here's my understanding about Avante. Avante is owned by a naturopath.
Correct.
And they normally employ nurse practitioners because nurse practitioners don't require a collaborating physician in order to be able to practice medicine. So how did you get that job?
It landed in my lap. And the dermatologist that I'm with had been a part-time dermatologist with us at Center Dermatology for years. He has known me for over 10 years. He has never wanted a PA because he didn't want the liability of a PA. But this opportunity came together. I need a collaborating physician. Even after 18 years of medical derm experience, I still need a collaborating physician. And I asked him, and he said, I've never had a PA. I've never wanted a PA. But for you, I trust you. We make a good team.
I know that you considered moving to Minnesota because Minnesota has independent practice for PAs. So you could have moved to Minnesota. You could have opened your own derm clinic by yourself. You could have continued doing the dermatology that you've been doing in Alaska for 18 years in Minnesota. That's true, right?
It's true. I actually had plans to commute. It's a 6-hour flight on Delta. You can fly in Monday morning, work for a couple of days. I had contacts at an established dermatology practice in the Twin Cities. Fly home on Thursday night at the 9:00 flight, and I can spend the weekend with my family. 6 hours and $600. And 18 years of derm experience was leaving.
And they were excited to have you. So how's it going at Avante?
Lovely. It is very nice to have the partnership and the support and the trust of a group of people that have never had an opportunity to have a PA.
So for the last 10 years, you've been the physician assistant representative for the Alaska State Medical Association, commonly abbreviated as ASMA.
Correct.
And I guess, how did that position come about, and what's that experience been like?
I took it over from a PA that was Their name is Beth, and she moved out of state, and I just segued right into her job, to her position. And ASMA is advisory to the medical board and to the legislature. And since docs and PAs work in partnership, they represent docs and PAs.
I'm a legislator who has served for 3 years, and so I have had interactions with ASMA. I will say straight up that I had no idea that they had a PA seat on their board, because I felt that there were some things they said that were derogatory towards PAs and not correct. And so I guess, are you able to talk at all about the way that organization feels about PAs and has interacted with PAs over your decade there?
It waxes and wanes. Sometimes I feel that I, as a PA, is seen as an advisor, and sometimes I feel like I'm not even in the room.
There has been some efforts to modernize the way PAs are treated in the Alaska statute. And I have felt, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that ASMA has been an impediment towards modernizing the statutes that govern PAs in the state of Alaska. How many doctors belong to ASMA? What percentage of doctors in Alaska are members of the Alaska State Medical Association?
Less than 10%. It's actually about 7%.
So not necessarily representative of all doctors in the state.
Correct.
But I think the way a legislator like myself, if I didn't know any better, I would think that they were speaking for all doctors in the state. So when they say something like, if this bill passes, it's going to kill patients, it carries a lot of weight.
Which is frustrating, because the PA regulations do need to be modernized. We are not in statutes. And a couple of years ago, there was a chair of the medical board that kind of went rogue. And the changes that he was wanting to make would have basically taken PAs off the table and off the map, and made it even harder for us to practice and to help serve Alaskan communities and patients. Right now, Alaska PAs need to have 2 collaborating physicians, and we're the only state that requires that. And this was rules that were set in 1970-ish, before PAs were really established. Training has changed. The world has changed. Collaboration has changed. Medicine has changed. We need to update our statutes.
And what I tell people all the time is that it's not that PAs are asking for anything new. What we're asking is for the laws of the state to reflect what actually happens in clinics, what actually happens when we go to work. We're not asking for more stuff. We're saying like, hey, this is the way things happen. If you have been doing this job for years, you know how to evaluate a patient and diagnose them and prescribe the appropriate treatment. You know how to do it. You don't need constant oversight. You don't need a person standing next to you to help you. You know how to do the job.
Correct. At this point, we work largely autonomously, knowing what our medical team is. What are my resources? Who do I need to call? I have been told by physicians in this community that I do more than they do. I manage medications that they don't manage. I do in-office surgeries that they don't know how to do. And they have told me that I'm a liability to whatever practice I would join, which is frustrating, because I think I'm a good team member of this community.
And there's examples of PAs working in our community, working at established practices for years and years, and then the members of that practice deciding to buy into the practice and it being offered to all the doctors there and all the nurse practitioners there, but not to the PAs.
This is true. There's a private practice office that was started and founded by a physician many years ago, and that physician retired, and rather than close the practice down, sold the practice to the providers that were there. And there were doctors, there were NPs, and there were PAs at that practice. And the PAs left that practice because they were told that they would, quote, never be equal, and they were not given an opportunity to purchase into that practice. And so now the practice is owned by docs and NPs, and those PAs are elsewhere.
And I've offered this before on the record as a
PA in the Alaska Army National Guard who deployed, there's always this assumption that the communication between PAs and docs is always PAs asking for help, PAs asking docs for advice. But when I deployed to Kosovo, I was the medical provider for 2 northern bases in Kosovo. There was a doc at the southern base at Bondsteel, and he was a new emergency physician. Like, he had just finished his residency, and this was his first big thing on his own. And I had worked in an emergency room for years. He would call and ask me questions. So it was very collaborative. When we say collaborative, we mean collaborative, not a hierarchical structure in which one person has all the information and the other person doesn't.
Correct. Medicine is a team sport, and it's knowing who's on your team, who do you need to ask whatever question you have. Just because I have a collaborating physician at the urgent care doesn't mean that I ask him directly. I ask who I need to ask for the specialty that I have a question about.
I know there's some new leadership at ASMA. Do you think that there's room for ASMA to support the updates to our profession?
Absolutely. And I think in the past, the information that has been given was, quote, independence. And a lot of doctors are riding right along behind the AMA of scope creep, and doctors need to be medical directors, and it's only doctors. But what PAs actually want is not independence, because you say independence and people think the sky is falling and that we're going to start taking over the world. What we want is for an experienced PA, we don't need a direct collaborating physician. Why can't I, as an experienced PA, just work for an office? Why can't even a brand new PA just work for an office, to work for a hospital department, to work for a clinic, and not be tied to one specific doctor? And I think this summer we did a lot of work with ASMA, and we're really able to be understood of what our needs as PAs are.
There is a concern about losing market share. I feel that PAs in Alaska have been kept down. There are specialty clinics that do not allow PAs to have ownership. They do not get percentages of what they bill. They get paid an hourly rate. There's just an institutionalized system in our state that prevents PAs from getting what they would get in most other states.
Right now, if a PA wants to own their own practice, open their practice, we certainly can. There's a few PAs that do own their own practice, and they have to find a collaborative physician. A lot of times that costs them money, either monthly or yearly. And so that's an income source for quite a few doctors.
That there are doctors supervising 18 physician assistants in different states, collecting a monthly check from those PAs and not talking to them.
There are doctors, that's their entire practice, is they have 50 state licenses and they collaborate in 50 states, and they live in Hawaii.
My nurse practitioner friends, they don't have to pay that fee if they open their own clinic.
Correct.
Christi Froiland, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review us. To contact me, email rep.andrew.gray@akleg.gov or call 907-269-0123.